Howdy team, welcome to another episode of the Pro Podcast. Today we have an interview with Alexis Kingsbury, who's an award-winning entrepreneur with 2 software businesses and a consulting practice, serving over 600 organizations around the world, including brands such as Sony, 3M, Swarovski, Crystal, I can't pronounce that, can I? Fitness Burst, and Pepsi. One of the things that I really wanted to get Alexis on to talk about is he, like me, is passionate about helping business leaders, business owners to create freedom to spend the time on what actually matters most, whatever that means to you. So through Alexis' work, he has saved thousands upon thousands of hours and time for business owners and leaders each and every single year, enabling them to work more effectively and unlock the business growth, which is exactly what we're going to be talking about today. Because in his own business, he's removed himself from the day-to-day operations, allowing him to spend 6 weeks on a road trip around Europe whilst the business continued to operate, but most importantly, continue to grow. So Alexis, thanks for coming to join us.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me, Gary.
That's all right, mate. So I want to get straight into it. How on earth did you manage to remove yourself from the day-to-day operations of your business?
Yeah, so it wasn't something that I did overnight, right? It's a journey really that I went on, and it's something that didn't actually come naturally to me. If we go back sort of 7-8 years ago, I would have said that I was an entrepreneur who had big dreams of having life and creating life-changing impact, making the world a better place. But the reality was that I was not able to do that, and I was completely stuck in my business. And when I was speaking to experts and so on out there that would tell me, well, you know, you've got to get some help. You've got to outsource some of your tasks. You've got to hire and grow what you're doing. And yet they made it sound easy and gave me tactics on how to do it. But every time I tried, it went wrong, and I just couldn't get it to work. I couldn't pass tasks and responsibilities to other people in a way that didn't result in them making lots of mistakes or not hitting the performance required, or would suck me back in. And so I'd end up repeating the often said phrases of business owners, which is, oh, it's just quicker if I do it myself, or, oh, this task, no, that needs to be me, or only I can do it well enough, or, whatever. And so I continued to be stuck. And I'm not talking for weeks or months. I mean years that I've been in that position, in my business, just unable to get out of it. And so I was working weekends, I was working evenings, it was damaging my relationship with my now wife. In fact, 7 years ago, we were married. So it'd been a really long slog, because I remember the examples of pre us getting married where it got to a point where she was planning on chucking me out. So I've been through that pain as an entrepreneur of trying to run the business in a way that you're able to free up your time and achieve these amazing things, and yet finding it completely impossible. So it was only really over a 3-year period where I became obsessed with basically saying, look, I need to work this out. I can't be successful as a business owner if I can't delegate. And so I read all the books, I spoke to the smartest people I knew, I spoke to the not so smart ones that were even more successful to try and identify what is it that I need to do differently. And over the years, I put it all together and created an approach that has meant that I've been able to then free up my time and produce and build a team that are able to support my customers without me, that they're able to not just do the day-to-day, but also keep on top of things and keep on top of processes and sort out issues and mistakes as they happen and make sure that they don't get repeated, meaning that I can take 6 weeks plus out of the business without needing to work. As I say, it wasn't an overnight thing.
Okay, so if we go back to initially, how many years did you spend working in the business, if we call it that, when you were almost fearing divorce or losing your other half? How many years were you in that mindset?
Yeah, so I'd say you could probably group it into 2 bunches of time. So the first was before I went to uni, and so like I was an entrepreneurial kid. I started early, like 11, 12 years old. I was starting businesses. And each time I got busy, I thought, oh, well, the problem is I haven't created a scalable business. I need to come up with a better business idea. When I couldn't kind of scale those, I think I started an online business because, .com boom was all around that sort of time or just starting. And still, I couldn't quite work it out because I'd get busy and then stuck and think, oh, yeah, no, the problem is the business idea. So I started another business idea, another. Went to university to try and learn. I'd studied management science to try and learn how to grow businesses at scale and still couldn't work it out. So, after hitting all those obstacles where I just ended up I had a Saturday job and was running my business and was attending lectures, and I just couldn't work out how to do this. So, after like any good entrepreneur, I carried on, and then went, actually, screw it, I'm going to give up. And I went and became a management consultant. So I worked for 3 years then in London for a sort of large 3,000 person management consultancy. And it was there that I then kind of learned how do big businesses like, my clients at the time, like Honda and AstraZeneca and UK government and BP and so on, how do they operate at scale? And it was kind of there that I realized, it's people and processes, and bringing those things together is what enables you to do it. Like, in theory, you can grow your business with one or the other. Like, if you've got really great people, but you haven't really got your processes sorted, then you can kind of rely on them being good at what they do. But you've got a high risk because as soon as one of them leaves or whatever, or you don't manage to make the perfect hire, or they don't quite know what they're doing, or the business shifts and they're not quite in a good place to do it, then actually performance drops. You couldn't just rely on having great people throughout the entire business. Like, it creates too much risk. Instead, what you need is some processes, and you can actually run an effective business on really good processes with average people. But the real power comes when you combine the both. When you have really, really great people and really clear processes that deliver, that's when you're suddenly getting over 50% conversion rates in your business, and super happy customers with really high net promoter scores and ratings and whatever. Like, that's when you bring all that together. And so that was what after doing that for 3 years, I then was like, ready, okay, I'm ready to start again. I think I've got it now. And then proceeded to spend another 5-6 years still struggling to grow the business and delegate. So all in all, if you add all that together, I'm embarrassed to say it probably ends up being just shy of about 15 years.
Okay. And I think that's probably the same for a lot of people as well, dude. I started my first business in 2006, had a team of 12, 15 people. We were doing nearly £1 million in sales, and I was still the first in, last out. And we didn't have clearly documented processes. We didn't sit down and work out exactly what needed to be happened. We had some scripts, but then I didn't actually like management, and I didn't have a manager to make sure that everybody was following the processes and the systems that worked solely for me. So I think that whole part of working in the business is where so many people get stuck. So for someone now, say for example, we'll go through 3 phases. So if there's a solopreneur listening to this right now who is working all the hours that God sends, is at their own capacity, because everybody has a capacity, is thinking about taking on their first employee or maybe their first hire, could be freelance PA, could be VA, whatever it is. Now, how do they start in your eyes, because process is your key area, how do they start to suddenly free themselves and give themselves the confidence to let go so they can begin to grow?
Yeah, great question. So I'd say the first thing is make sure that what you're handing over is stuff you know works. I think sometimes the temptation is to hand over the stuff that you don't like or is an unknown. So a classic example of this for business owners might be some of the finance stuff where you're like, I don't really get it. I don't understand or like numbers. Therefore, I'm going to abdicate from the whole thing and just pass it all over to my accountant. Now, of course, if you're clear on what you want from your accounts and you know what you want the bookkeeping to do, i.e. how you want the financials to be categorized and what you want in terms of reporting so that you can see how the business is doing and reflect on that and make changes, then that's great. That's ready to be delegated to someone else. But if you're like, oh, it's just a mess, I don't know what I'm doing, and I don't really know what I should be looking at, the risk is that you hand that over to someone who just goes, great, yeah, you don't have to look at this at all. And best case scenario, you will just not have the visuals that you need and you won't be able to understand the financials to be able to make decisions. Worst case scenario, you'll end up defrauded and money taken out in your name. And I've seen business owners who end up tens or even hundreds of thousands in debt to HMRC or whatever, because the money's been siphoned off elsewhere because they haven't got that knowledge in of their business. Be very careful and wary of outsourcing or delegating something that you don't really understand and or is a mess, and avoid abdicating and just going, oh yeah, someone else can deal with all of this and I don't want to have to look at it. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, once you've got clear on, okay, I'm not abdicating, I am delegating, I'm taking something that I understand, whether it's sales, whether it's some of your admin, whether it's your bookkeeping, whether it's responding to customer queries and requests for price quotes and things like that, like whatever it is, then breaking it down into, okay, what are the series of tasks that I want someone to do? And then creating your guidance around and what are the steps that you expect them to take when they do it. By doing that, it does a few things. Firstly, it means that you don't have to go through all the pain of back and forth. Like, you bring someone in, you kind of think, oh, well, they'll do a good job. You know, I've taken them through a really rigorous recruitment process. You know, my friend said that they worked with them before and they were awesome. So I'll just bring them in and they'll do a good job. And the problem is that what you think is a good job and what they think is a good job won't necessarily be aligned. Not only in terms of whether or not you have the same bar in terms of quality, but also in terms of what you think looks good and is in line with your brand and all that kind of stuff won't necessarily be the same as them. And so as a result, you'll end up, if you don't get that right, you'll end up with this really frustrating period of lots of back and forth. You'll be questioning whether, oh, did I hire the wrong person? They'll be feeling like, oh, I'm letting them down and, you know, I don't seem to be able to get anything right. And that's a really painful experience. And best case scenario, you muddle your way through, and after a few months, you get to a point where you're like, oh, it was painful at the beginning, but now we're through it and this is good. And you'll be feeling like, but I'm not overly enthused about hiring again. Like, if I can avoid putting that off because that was painful, that's like your best case scenario. Worst case scenario, they leave because they're fed up of the micromanagement and the questions and the feedback that you give that's not really clear, or you fire them because you're like, you know, I've asked them to do a really simple thing and they can't even do it. And it's like, well, you have in your mind, but have you made it easy? Have you made it clear? First, make sure that you're delegating, not abdicating. Secondly, get really clear about what the tasks are that you're handing over and get the right person who's got the skills to do those tasks. And then third, make sure that you're giving enough guidance that they can actually do a good job without you having to spend weeks or months having to slowly spoon feed that guidance. Like, when I bring people into my team, it takes me about an hour in terms of my actual time in training them in their first week before they can start adding value, like doing customer calls and so on. That is so freeing in terms of my ability to scale and grow. You got to have that guidance there.
Yeah, so you start with effectively creating checklists, like we like Loom videos in ours, and almost documenting everything that you're doing that you want to let go of, and giving them the opportunity then to be able to almost tick it off like a recipe, in terms of knowing that they've done that step before they move on to the next step. And I think you have to appreciate that it's going to be at least hard for 3 months with any new recruit that you bring into the business. And it's always going to be hard the first time you do it. So moving on to we've taken on our first employee, for example. You know, we've got some experience, maybe you're stressed out, maybe you've got some fear around, you've freed up some time, you've got some fear around potentially taking on the next one. Maybe we've even gone to the point of utilizing the same model. You know, we bring our PA in as an example, we get them to watch us, we create some checklists, maybe record a couple of videos of us using the system, we show them how to answer the phone and give them a bit of a script. You know, as the business begins to grow, you then have an even bigger challenge, because it becomes Chinese whispers in a process and a systemized sense, because someone else is now potentially training someone else how to do an admin or a sales or a marketing job. So that next level up is there a number of employees where you need to start taking process and systems more seriously?
Yeah.
And 2, how do you really systemize your processes to make it possible for team to manage the system and therefore manage the process and to deliver exceptional conversions and an exceptional customer service?
Yeah, definitely. Love the way you've set that up. So, yes, I'd say that there's a point at which you start to feel this pain even more acutely. And I think it's after your 4th team member. And the reason for that is because when you're 2, 3, 4 people, yes, you're bringing them in and you're handing them tasks, but you're still very much managing them or directly working with them. You've got a lot of visibility. And if they're not available, then it's likely it's you're back to doing it. And as a result, like, you've still got that visibility. Like, if they had a checklist, for example, for doing your bank reconciliations, well, as soon as they go on holiday, it's probably you that's then picking that up. And so you've got that. Once you start to get to 5 team members and above, that changes. Now, as you say, you've probably got someone, you start to get one in between, like you're hiring people that are being trained by other team members of yours. And that's when you start to create that risk that what you set up, if you set it up in a way that it was like, oh, it's quite good in terms of either checklist or videos or whatever, but actually it didn't get, only got kind of 50%, 60% there. The rest of it was through your coaching, your feedback and so on. Then when it goes out a level, it now doesn't have that. And so and you don't get visibility of that, because if that person's on holiday, then the other person took over. You never even get the opportunity to see that. For example, the way that we chase our invoices and chase payments is really poor, and therefore that's why your cash flow is so weak. And, you don't get that visibility because it starts to be further away from you. And that's the risk, is it becomes what you don't see.
If you're somebody who is a visual learner and loves to see content on a whiteboard, see me talking, then you can head over to YouTube. We constantly provide 1 to 2 episodes every single week, sometimes exclusive content, event content that we have recorded, so that you can learn the strategies that you need to generate your leads and increase your sales. We're all about helping you to earn more, work less, and live a lifestyle you love. So head over to YouTube and see some of the content with your own eyes there.
And having it documented is crucial for that. And having it documented in a way that's easy to review is what creates the transparency. You mentioned using like Loom videos and so on, and videos definitely have a place. So for us, when I'm training our sales teams and consultants, they do watch recordings of previous calls with customers so they can get a feel for how things are, how the call is managed. However, they have a checklist for the steps to go through on that sales call. I don't expect them to divine from watching the recording what the steps are, what the questions are that they should be asking, because they won't remember it. They won't get it right every single time if they have to remember based on the recording. But actually, generally, we'd recommend use checklists, because they're so much easier to follow, to review, to make changes to, continuously improve, and actually use live in the moment as well, which is very difficult to do with videos. So I think when you're at that stage of business, that's that next level that you need to take of getting things organized so that you can look across the business and see what processes exist, where they don't exist, whether they're complete, and helping people get the detail. And equally, that means that when a problem happens, when mistakes are repeated, or when onboarding feels like a real nightmare, either client onboarding or employee onboarding, you can dive into where's the part of your business that you need to work on and fix, make the changes, step back and see what you've done, continue to make changes if needed, and then move on. But yeah, you've got to have that ability to see across the whole thing, which, if you've created it, what we'd say with paper and string, we've got some Google Docs over here and Loom videos over here, starts to become really painful.
I see. So it's really sitting down and going through each individual process, looking at each area and each stage of the sales process, each job role specifically, and not just having it on Loom videos or having it on, as you say, a Google Doc or a Word document or something on those lines, but really leveraging it in tech. Is that AI do this for you now?
Yeah, so we'd certainly recommend that the way to make all of this easy and even possible to manage and be able to step out of the business yourself is that you need everything in one place when it comes to how to do stuff. So I've got 2 software businesses. Before we created Air Manual, for my other software business at Spider Gap, we had to do it the way that everyone else is used to doing it, using the Google Docs and all those things. But crucially, what made the difference for us was when we created essentially Google Sheets for each team that listed out, these are the processes in the business, here's who owns each, here's when it was last used, here's the frequency that we want this particular activity to happen on, if appropriate, and therefore when it's next due and whether it's overdue, and then the link to the related process. And that it was way better, because then you're not having when an employee doesn't follow a process, like, go back to Janet. If you say, hey Janet, you didn't check the customer's VAT setup before they got enrolled, you don't want to be in a position where Janet can quite rightfully just go, oh, I didn't know we had a process for that.
Yeah.
And or even go, oh, well, I checked Loom and I couldn't find one, or I checked Google Docs and I couldn't find one. You want it to be, all your processes to be in a place where everyone knows that that's where you go, and you go to one place and it'll be there, or it'll be clear that it's not like, oh, maybe I look for it. You don't want to be in that situation that you don't have the ability to manage and scale effectively when that's the case. So that's what I'd recommend, is whether you use, purpose-built software like Air Manual, or whether you put it together with a variety of tools, you do need to be in a position where you can look in one place. And of course, a great example of this is how it used to be done was you'd have the company manual. It'd be a physical manual in a folder, sat on a shelf, and at the very least, if someone needs to know how to do something, they could go there. Now, the way that business has progressed means that, firstly, people tend not to use the manual that often, so it becomes dusty and unloved because it's painful to get out and whatever. Also, as we grow and be more online and so on, that becomes more difficult. We want the ability to search. We want the ability to make changes. Very hard to do in your paper manual sat on the shelf. We want the ability to be able to report on it and see what's been done. When's it next due? Is it overdue? Who owns it? All of that information that isn't in your paper manual, that a purpose-built tool like Air Manual, that's exactly how we've set it up to do those kind of things. So I would recommend that people go down the route, because when you don't, it creates so much risk of things not being followed, and therefore mistakes. And in my experience, mistakes easily costs thousands, tens of thousands of pounds each time one's made. In fact, we had a mistake recently that cost me £2,000. But the nice thing is I've been able to make a couple of tweaks in my processes, and that mistake won't ever happen again. So, you don't want repeated mistakes in your business. It absolutely kills it. And so you do need that ability to have that visibility.
Yeah, I know one thing that's going to come across, and people are going to be sitting there going, oh yeah, but I just don't have the time to create these processes and to document everything that I'm doing. And then also, how do you make people stick to the processes that you actually put in place and remind them that they need to check, the manual that we've got and we've created online? For someone who's got a person of 5 or up, what's the biggest pain for them in not going through the process of documenting everything that they do, when it's done, how it's done, who's doing it, etc.?
Yeah, so I'll talk about the pain, and then I'll jump back to the time and the documenting everything and so on. So if in terms of the pain, it does vary depending on who we're working with, but the most common issues that people have are either they're just running ragged, right? As a business owner, they're spending 60 plus hours a week in the business. They feel completely unable to work on the business. They don't even know where they would start. And so, it's stressful. It's affecting their family life. They know it's affecting their health, and they know it's unsustainable, but they can't see a way out. And that's sadly common. Breaks my heart when I see it, particularly when I see it in what would otherwise be described as successful businesses, because they're growing fast. So that's the first one. The second is when you've got businesses who are really struggling to get people trained up and onboarded. So every time that they're growing, which is great, and you want to bring people in, but it's going to derail us for months if we bring this person in, because we bring them in and then the rest of the sales team has to train them. But the reason we're bringing someone in is because they're busy. And so I'm going to have to train them, and that's going to take a long time. And so you hold back from hiring and growing when actually when you're busy is when you should be hiring, right? That's a signal to you that you want to be growing. So that's one of the common ones, is when your onboarding and ability to get people up to speed is taking many weeks and months or even years to get people up to speed, whereas it should be taking days to get them up to speed and adding value. And in terms of that's elapsed time, in terms of effort, it should be taking hours in terms of training them. Another would be around mistakes. So if you're seeing repeated mistakes, drop balls, etc., like I mentioned with that accounting business, that's a common pain point, and that what that results in is firefighting. It means that the business owner is spending all of their time just fixing stuff that's going wrong, rather than working on the business and being able to work on strategic partnerships, new marketing things, and whatever. And it's just painful and stressful, which kind of culminates in the fourth one, which is key person dependency. So and sometimes that's for the business leader, sometimes it's for members of the team, sometimes the whole team, is that no one can go anywhere without constantly checking email, being available on the phone. They can't go on holiday, they can't ignore their phone for the evenings, they can't, even at the weekends, because everything is dependent on them. And the very idea that one of those team members would suddenly, get hit by a bus, be sick, whatever, it just becomes terrifying, because what the hell would we do if that person's not here? No one else knows how to send invoices, or no one else knows how to sell effectively, or whatever it is. And that creates huge stress for people. And actually, it's not even just for the business owner. Because sometimes we're business owners that say, worried about documenting. If I document, won't my team think it's because I want to make them expendable and I can just replace them and make them redundant? So, well, no, the story that I often tell to help people change the focus is that, and I've had this in my business, but we'll use it as hypothetical because there's personal stuff in there. But imagine if you've got a team member who has a family member who dies suddenly and in tragic circumstances, right? You want that team member to be able to step out of the business and go and be with their family and to grieve and to support and do all those things, right? That's a really important thing that they're able to do at that point. What you don't want to be doing is having to call them on the Monday after it's happened over the weekend and say, I'm really, really sorry to disturb you. I know it's a really tricky time at the moment, but no one else knows how to access the system. No one else can do this. No one else can do this. Or even if you think, but I won't disturb them. I'll take the hit. My business, we'll have to cope. We won't send the invoices. We'll do whatever. What about the emails they get? They know, if they're good, they know that they're the only person that can do it. And so they will get the emails from the client saying, by the way, I haven't received this yet. Or, can you help me with this? Or, we had a call scheduled for 12, but you didn't show up. They'll be getting that. And that doesn't help. That is a horrible experience for anyone to have in their life. And so I believe that as employers, we have a great responsibility to make sure that isn't the case for your teams, and that they are able to take time out in their lives at the most important times. You and I have got a shared contact who shared recently in a messaging group that we're part of, where as a business owner, despite horrendous, tragic personal loss, and a recommendation that she take at least 3 weeks, but certainly more, out of the business not working, she felt after 1 or 2 she had to go back to work because the business depended on her so much. And as a result, the last 18 months of her life have been the worst. And I just think that as entrepreneurs, as business owners, we shouldn't have to wait. And I don't believe that we need to wait for one imaginary day in the future when we've created some personal, permanent success that means that we can be forever free and enjoying our lives. I think you need to enjoy the journey. You need to have that freedom and enjoyment now through the process of building the business, rather than have to wait. And so I think that's why it's important to put that in place. So that's the first thing, is that's the pain. Now, if that, given that, you might look at that and go, okay, frankly, any amount of time spent sorting this out is worth it. But here's the crazy thing. most business owners, when we talk to them about this, they go, right, I get it. I need to document all my processes. And we go, love the enthusiasm, but no, you don't need to document all of your processes. Over time, you will document more and more, and you may get to a point that, say, 80%, 90% of your business is documented, but you should never get to a point where 100% is documented. For example, how do I open an email? Like, some stuff doesn't need a process. Some of it will just be new. Some of over time, that'll be the case. And you only want to be documenting where you're getting the value. And so that's why with the approach that we use with clients, we say the first stage is focus. Identify what's your biggest problem right now. Is it sales conversion? Is it the amount of pain that you've got in terms of follow-up? Is it cash flow? Is it that you've got a key person who the business is highly dependent on and you want to be able to free them up? Perhaps they're going on maternity leave in a month or two or whatever. Like, start with what's the problem you want to solve. Then second stage is outline the tasks that need to be and the guidance that needs to exist so that you could solve that problem. So, for example, we worked with the owner of a printing business who he was working 60-hour weeks, completely unable to work on the business, absolutely stuck in it, absolute ideal client in terms of, one of those pain points that I described earlier. He felt unable to even see where he needed to document. So we said, well, we need to free up your time. Where are you currently spending your time? We outlined a few tasks and identified one, which was he was spending 3 hours per day on. That's 15 hours per week, which was sending quotes to customers. So a customer says, hey, can I get a quote for doing this embroidery and printing and so on? Can I get a quote? And typically that would come to him because it's tricky and needs to make sure that profit's in there and whatever. And that would take him at some point, get around to it in 2 to 3 days. So we said, well, let's document that out. And he said, I know I need to document it. I just haven't found the time. I figure it'll probably take me 8 hours and I've just not found the time. Now, of course, 8 hours to get 15 hours per week back should already be enough of incentive, but he hadn't found the time. So I said, well, we've got 45 minutes left of this call. Let's see what we can do. And in that time, we documented out, okay, like at a high level, what's this process about? What are the high level steps? Then we added in the detail for the explanations and the tricky bits and the logic. We added screenshots where it wasn't apparent how to use a tool in a particular way. We added in warnings to stop common or high impact mistakes. We included text fields that people could enter data to track the quote number and so on to make it easy to refer back to. And all of that took less than 30 minutes, by the way. And then once we'd done that, we arranged a call with his account managers to say, okay, now this is going to get handed over to you. We got them to then test it and run through it. And with him watching to see if they had any questions, if they made any mistakes, we just changed live into the process. Again, an example where you want to checklist run videos for that because you can just make the change live. And then get to a point where it's like, yeah, he's happy that they're able to do the quotes. And as a result, his account managers were able to respond to quotes, which saved up 15 hours a week for him. But also, they took less than an hour to respond to customers with their request for quotes. Imagine the impact on conversion rate, right? So that's an example where that business owner spent total an hour and a half, maybe 3 hours, putting that in place to save 15 hours per week forever. And then the next thing was that we then put in the stages are focus, outline, prioritize, document, and test. So that loop with them making the changes, document it, and so on, get all that tested. Once they're in place, final step is manage. And so you put in management frameworks, which I can talk about, that mean that everyone is clear on what processes they're meant to be following, that they keep on track of, are we using these processes and are we doing them frequently? That they are making improvements to them and so on. I can talk about exactly how you do that. But the key, but also you reprioritize, okay, what's the new area for focus? And back to the beginning. And by repeating that cycle over 9 months, that business owner completely removed themselves from the day-to-day.
Got ya. Yeah, it makes total sense. It's just it's just going through the journey. And as you say, you have to enjoy the journey of building a business. And it's really important that you document as you go, much like someone who sits there and goes, oh my God, I need to create a business plan. I've got to set some financial management. I need to do some lead generation and some sales. I need to put a new system in place. I need to do all of that. And then their brain just goes, I can't do it because I'm now overwhelmed. It's like building blocks, one step at a time, and as you say, start with the most painful area first. And then once you've ticked that box and got that process and that system done and delegated, then move on to the next one, and then move on to the next one. And if you take a mindset that you're doing this over a 12 to 24 month period rather than a 12 to 24 day period, then actually it's going to be a much, much sturdier business.
Exactly right. And in terms of timescale, I think certainly for when we did it previously, I think it probably took us 2 to 3 years to get to that point. When we've done it with clients, we can typically, depending on the scale of the business and how much they get this, they can typically do it over a period of about 4 to 9 months in terms of going from completely stressed out, no idea where to get to like designed yourself out the business and everything's smooth. So it is possible to do over in the scheme of things, short period. But the key is that you don't have to wait 9 months to get the value. Like you can get value within a week or two. And so that's where the real power comes from, is that already you start getting the benefit already.
We've spoken a lot about process and systems and recruitment and onboarding of team, which is where, so many people end up being trapped and stuck in their business because, they're still doing everything themselves, or believing that no one can do it as well as them, or not recruiting quick enough because they're fearful of capacity and letting go in order to be able to grow. I know one of the areas in which you're saving huge amounts of time as we come to a close, because we're slowly but surely running out of time on today. You're as interested in good old ChatGPT as I am. And you mentioned earlier, the need for some employers or business owners documenting their processes can often make their team feel a bit fearful of, are they making them dispensable to a degree? How are you using ChatGPT and AI to make your business more efficient and, save time as well where you possibly can?
Yeah, so I do love what's happening in the world of AI and ChatGPT and so on, and we've separately talked quite a bit about it, the various opportunities for it. There are lots of ways in which you can use AI, and indeed, I think one of the ways that we kind of talked about before this interview started was relating to podcasts as an example, is that for things like audio processing, you can save a hell of a lot of time now by just chucking a file through a bit of AI software, and it will make it sound like it's been in a studio, when in the example you shared, you recorded it at a live event. I've had experiences where maybe I've had a guest that's got some really great insights to share, and possibly even was sharing something quite raw and vulnerable, and something that perhaps wasn't even fully thought through, but it was an absolute gem. But the message is so difficult to pull out because of lots of hesitation and repeated words and ums and ers and filler. And what I really want to do is take that and turn it into its own standalone clip, like as an audiogram, get that out in the world. And as a result, that sends that message and also allows people to then get referred to de-stress your business and check out the full episode and all this sort of stuff. Normally, editing audio and video and so on takes a lot of time and often requires specialist skills that are expensive to acquire into your business. Whereas if you use a tool like Descript, which is a platform that includes AI tools, including sorting out studio sound, but also literally in a few clicks, you can remove all those filler words. You can edit, it uses AI to transcribe all of the video and the audio, so that you can edit the video and the audio as if you're editing like a Word document. You can remove words and you can reorder it even. You can even train it on your voice, so that if you perhaps said the wrong word, like you gave the wrong link as part of a thing, it's like, now I've got to re-record it or whatever. Instead, if you've trained it on your voice, you can just literally do it using a feature it calls overdub. You can select that text, write what you meant to say, and it will use your voice and even your recording environment, like so similar sound, to replace it. And it's stuff like that that is incredible in terms of time saved. And we actually helped one of our clients, Anna Moran, who's got a podcast of her own, like 1,000 downloads an episode, really, really successful. But she was held back because she was having to spend too much time editing the podcast. So we documented out the process that she was essentially going through as a checklist, and then said, okay, this is taking so much time you don't feel able to delegate it because you think it'll be expensive and you'll have to get an expert podcast editor and it's going to take them 3 days like it does for you. Where are you spending most of your time? And so when we identified it was things like removing those filler words, a quick Google shows an AI tool, put that into the checklist, this is how you use it, open it up, put the file in here, and suddenly you've halved the amount of time it takes to do the editing and made the whole thing able to be done by a virtual assistant rather than an expensive editor. And suddenly for her, who previously hadn't been able to outsource and so on, it completely unlocks it, right? So I love AI for that. The challenge is that there are millions of things you could do with AI. It doesn't mean you should. Like your biggest problem in your business right now is not how to use AI. You need to start with what's the focus, what's the problem in the business, and then look at how you can then apply AI, or at least for most businesses, that's the right way around to look at it, so that you can maximize the value.
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah, we've been using it in very similar ways for, getting ideas of titles or descriptions, or even to, save yourself some time in the creative thinking side of coming up for ideas. We're interviewing a digital marketing assistant today. I've done the first interview online because it's a role that is, delegating some of the tasks that I love to do in marketing. But I've got my 2 team members in the office doing the first face-to-face before I'll do a third. Nice. So I just said, create me 10 questions for a digital marketing executive joining a mortgage brokerage in the UK. And, just got it to pump out 10 questions that I just chucked over to them as a little bit of a guide and a kind of template, having given the guidance of, I want them to do emails, I want them to do SEO, and, they can do whether they're right for the office. Because if they come in and culturally and personality-wise, they're not a good fit for us and they're different to the Zoom than they, or the in-person than they are in Zoom, what's the point in me doing a third interview? And obviously taking more time out of my diary. So, yeah, there's so many different ways you can chuck into AI or into some form of tech to speed up the creative process, without a doubt.
Yeah, and in fact, I've got a post on my LinkedIn at the moment where I've shared 4 options for opening lines of a presentation that I'm doing. I'm speaking at Expert Empires at the time of recording next week. I think at the time of release, it'll be a couple of weeks ago. I've basically got the whole presentation written, but I was just making some tweaks to the intro. And so I shared 4 lines out saying, here's 4 potential opening lines. What's your favorite? By the way, I wrote one, a colleague wrote another, and 2 of them are AI. And what's really interesting is all of the options have had at least, after the first 5 votes, all of the options had got at least 1 vote. Yeah. So regardless of which ends up being the favorite, people, based on not knowing which one's the AI one, are picking AI selected, first lines. And what's really interesting, and something that's an important thing when you think about AI, is that when I first got the ChatGPT, and I was using GPT-4, which is a massive improvement on the previous model. When I was using GPT-4, the answers it was giving, the suggestions, I was like, I don't like it. I think this feels a bit wanky, and I don't like it. And so literally over dinner that evening, I was talking to a business owner and said, here's some examples. And I didn't tell him which was mine and which was AI. And his preferred ones were the AI one. And so I was like, that's interesting. So I'm bringing my own bias to these lines, and it's entirely possible that the AI is right and I'm not. And so that's really interesting. On the flip side, most of the time, particularly with GPT 3.5, I found that I was right and it wasn't, particularly on points of factuality and maths and so on. GPT-4 is a huge step forward, though. There are things that I think it will get right that we don't see, or are more difficult. And then it's just going to keep on improving, right? So I think the key is that you have a process around it. I think that, what you wouldn't want to do is go, hey, give me 10 questions and chuck those exactly as they are and not even review them, because they won't be right for your organization. They won't be perfect. They won't fit in with your values. And actually there might be questions that have already been asked earlier in their recruitment process, which means that that looks a bit rubbish for the candidate. So you do need the upfront creativity to even ask the question, but then you need that review step to make sure it's going to fit your needs. And I think that is the most effective way that humans can work with AI to achieve really amazing things in their business, is when you've got that clarity of where does AI sit in your process.
Yeah, I love that, mate. Thank you very much indeed. Yeah, it's exactly the same as what I'm doing. You use it for the, some of the heavy lifting, but you have to always sign it off and do your own checking. You can't just copy and paste from AI and shove up to wherever you want to, because it will lack the context or the personality or the personalization that it really needs to get the results that you want.
Yeah, and I think that's relatively easy with text, because you can read the text and go, yeah, I'm happy with this. Like, this is in line with my messages. This isn't going to upset people. It's, whatever. It's quite hard with images. So
Yeah.
I've been using tools like DALL-E and Midjourney and so on to produce AI images. And sometimes you'll get an image that you go, oh, that's good. Like, oh, yeah, it's done a really good job. In fact, at time of recording, Midjourney 5 has recently dropped, and the detail that provides is incredible. It's like photos. Like, if you ask it give me a picture of a person smiling in the sunshine in a meadow, and it will give you something that basically looks like a photo, or as good as the movies can do into their computer generated stuff. So it's like incredible. And so you'll say wow, that's amazing. That's perfect. And I can include that. You have to be careful though, because for example, upon closer inspection, you might identify that they've got too many fingers, or that their elbow's in the wrong place, or that there's a book open on a desk behind them, except the book is all shifted, or that there's a computer, maybe it's somewhere on the keyboard, and the keyboard's too long, and you're like, because it doesn't know. Like, it's a really interesting area. I'm loving exploring it.
Without a shadow of a doubt. Love a bit of tech, love a bit of simplification and saving a wee bit of time. So thank you very much indeed for coming on the show today, Alexis, and sharing wisdom around process, systems, documentation, how to effectively scale and remove yourself from the day-to-day, as well as the finishing off with ChatGPT. We are the Pro Podcast. I came up with Pro because I believe that perseverance leads to results, which creates opportunity. What does being a pro really mean to you?
I think being a pro to me is about mastering your craft in a way that it's like never accepting that there isn't something you can't learn. I think the best gurus are the ones that feel really uncomfortable about being called that, because they feel like there's still more that I don't know about this topic than stuff that I do. Great example, like we've been talking about AI, compared to most business owners and entrepreneurs out there, I'm further ahead. I must be, 0.1% of business owners that study this stuff. Yeah, I wouldn't regard myself as an expert, nowhere close, because I still feel like there's so much to learn. And so I think that's what being a pro means to me. And I think when you're honing and when you're learning and putting things into practice and testing, that's when you get the results, and that's when you get it creates the opportunities for you.
Yeah, awesome. And we'll put links in the show notes to everything that Alexis has given us. Where's your preferred social media channel if someone wants to reach out and find out, about ChatGPT, or grab your ebook, or find out about Air Manual? What social media channel is your favorite hangout?
Yeah, main one would be LinkedIn for me. So you can find me, Alexis Kingsbury. But I do post fairly regularly to Instagram, TikTok, Facebook as my kind of alternates, and also on YouTube. And also people can check out AlexisKingsbury.com, which has got a little bit more about my history, some of my speaking. It's got links to loads of videos and some of the resources that I've talked about, a bit about my different businesses as well. People can reach out and contact me and find my social links all there as well.
Awesome. Alexis, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Team, I shall look forward to seeing you on the next episode. Speak soon.